Hey there, welcome back. Tonight, we're diving into a life that began in the greatest city of its age, Rome, and in the quiet footsteps of the boy who would become Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar's life stretches across revolutions, exiles, triumphs, and betrayals. But before he became a symbol, carved into centuries, he was a thin, sharp-eyed child walking between the shadows of patrician columns. By watching this video, you'll learn how this single life rose from delicate beginnings, shaped an empire's breath, and left an imprint on history that still murmurs beneath our days. So settle in, feel your shoulders drop. Tonight, we were drifting back more than 2,000 years into a city that wakes slowly beneath the Mediterranean sun. Before we begin, a small note. If you enjoy these calm journeys through history, I upload new videos every day, so consider subscribing and turning on the bell. And tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it for you right now? I love imagining people drifting off to the same story under different skies. Now, let's step softly into Rome. The morning light falls pale and gentle over the Subura district, catching on terracotta rooftops still cool from the night. Narrow alleyways breathe out the scent of damp stone and faint olive smoke. Somewhere, a street vendor is already preparing his stall, the scrape of wood against pavement blending with the cooing of pigeons on the eaves. In a house not far from this hum, a child named Gaius Julius Caesar wakes to the muted warmth of a household steeped in both pride and quiet decline. You can almost picture him sitting up slowly, touching the woven blanket beneath his fingertips, the texture rough but familiar. His family, ancient in name, modest in wealth, carries the lineage of kings, priests, and half-forgotten legends. Yet the room around him is simple. Clay lamps, a small bronze figurine of an ancestor, the faint scent of last night's extinguished flame. Outside, the world is vast and unpredictable, but inside, he is wrapped in the soft rustle of his mother, Aurelia's footsteps in the corridor. As he walks into the atrium, light pools on the polished tiles like spilled honey. Water drips from the household fountain, each drop echoing with a tender clarity. Aurelia, a woman of remarkable discipline and gentleness, watches her son with a gaze both cautious and loving. She understands something that even Caesar does not yet know. The Republic is trembling beneath the weight of its own ambitions, and her son will one day stand at the center of its shifting ground. Across the city, the forum murmurs awake. Senators in white togas glide through colonnades veiled in morning haze. Market stalls unfurl their fabrics, each color catching the rising sun. Saffron yellows, somber purples, muted greens dyed from crushed leaves. The faint smell of wax tablets and freshly cut reeds lingers in the air. Rome is a city of contrasts, the scrape of sandals beside stately villas, the tension between honor and survival, the hum of expectation that seems to wrap the streets like a thin veil. For young Caesar, this world feels enormous but strangely intimate. He passes by statues with solemn faces, their marble eyes softened by centuries of dust. He hears the rhythm of distant prayers drifting from a nearby shrine, notes the fragrance of incense curling lazily upward. These sensations, gentle and persistent, settle deep into him, forming the earliest shapes of his ambitions. At night, when oil lamps flicker along the walls, shadows dance like silent storytellers. Caesar listens to murmured tales of ancestors who claimed descent from Venus herself. He doesn't fully understand these stories yet, but he feels the weight of them. The idea that destiny is something woven into one's name, like threads of gold hidden within a garment's lining. He grows in the midst of a republic brimming with unrest, though its tremors are still subtle. The Senate chambers whisper with rivalries, generals dream of personal glory, the poor crowd the streets, their voices rising with quiet desperation. But to a child, Rome's turbulence is softened, muffled, almost tender, like thunder heard from far across the hills. Standing in the twilight courtyard, he touches the cold marble of the family altar. The stone smells faintly of dust and old prayers. A breeze drifts through the columns, carrying with it the distant sound of a flute played at a nearby festival. In this gentle interlude, long before he becomes consul, general, or dictator, he feels something stir inside, a sense that time is vast, that life stretches beyond the horizon, and that his footsteps might someday echo further than he can currently imagine. And so begins the quiet dawn of Julius Caesar's life, not with conquest or command, but with soft footsteps across marble floors, the fragrance of olive oil lamps, and a young boy learning to breathe in the world of Rome. Part 2. The quiet seeds of ambition. Morning settles over Rome like a thin veil of gold, warming the rooftops and drifting softly into the courtyards where young Caesar moves through the first true years of awareness. He is older now, still delicate in frame, still attentive to every whisper around him. But there is something new beneath his calm exterior, a quiet hunger shaped by the world he observes. As you return to his story, imagine yourself walking beside him through streets washed in early sunlight, hearing the muted thrum of a city holding its breath between tradition and change. He spends his youth surrounded by the steady rhythm of Roman life, the scrape of reed pens on wax tablets, the rustle of wool garments brushed against mosaic floors, the crisp scent of laurel leaves crushed for household rituals. Tutors guide him through lessons in language and memory, their voices low and measured. Latin poetry, soft as the dust that settles on scrolls, fills the small study rooms where he sits. The verses speak of heroes and gods, of honor and sacrifice, and Caesar listens with an attentiveness that makes the lamp flames flicker as if moved by his concentration alone. His education is not merely academic. Aurelia, with her firm grace and disciplined heart, teaches him how to move through a world where appearances matter as much as actions. She shows him the subtleties of posture, the way a slight tilt of the head can convey respect or defiance, how silence can reveal discipline. Under her guidance, he learns composure, a stillness that later becomes part of his power. The tactile memory of her hand adjusting his shoulder, the faint scent of the oils she used to polish the household altar, stays with him long after childhood fades. Outside their home, the Forum becomes a quiet theater of fascination for him. He watches magistrates stride beneath high columns, their togas brushing the marble steps like slow waves against stone. The murmurs of debate drift between porticos, soft at first, then gaining strength like rising wind. Though he is too young to join them, Caesar absorbs the atmosphere with a kind of reverent curiosity, the coolness of the stone beneath his fingertips as he traces the edges of an old inscription, the warmth of the sun on his brow, the earthy smell of the crowd around him. These sensations braid themselves into the first strands of ambition. As he grows, he begins to understand the subtle pulse of the Republic. The patrician families cling to their heritage, their voices calm but heavy with caution. The populares speak to the crowds with more urgency, gestures wide, words thick with promise. Caesar listens to both and senses that neither side fully sees the other. The air around them feels charged, like the moment before a summer storm, when the wind softens but carries a warning. Even as a youth, he recognizes that Rome's power is both immense and fragile, suspended between past glories and future uncertainties. His first priesthood initiation, performed in a small shrine embroidered with flickering shadows, marks a turning point. The air inside is cool and perfumed with burnt cedar. Candlelight trembles in the corners. Caesar kneels, his hands resting on smooth stone warmed only slightly from the flames. Although the ceremony is modest, he feels a shift inside, a new sense of belonging to something larger than himself. The tactile coolness of the floor, the rising incense, the murmur of sacred words all settle deep into him, forming the earliest memory of responsibility. But Rome does not let him bask in innocence for long. Politics bleeds into every household, even those that wish to remain on the margins. Caesar begins to hear names spoken with caution: Marius, Sulla, Cinna. At dinner, voices fall quieter when certain topics arise. His mother's fingers tighten ever so slightly around the cup she holds. Through these half-whispered conversations, he senses that ambition can be both a blessing and a blade. The Republic rewards boldness, but punishes it just as swiftly. He walks the city's streets with a contemplative air, noticing details that others overlook. Vendors argue over prices, with the dry crackle of papyrus between their hands. Forum scribes scratch notes that echo faintly against the stone. A procession of priests passes by, the fringe of their garments brushing softly against the road. Caesar watches it all, absorbing textures, gestures, and movements as though collecting pieces of a puzzle he has not yet fully understood. Aurelia continues to guide him with quiet strength. She encourages his curiosity, but warns against arrogance. When he grows frustrated with his studies, she reminds him gently that mastery is found not in speed, but in patience. Her lessons sink into him like ink on parchment, leaving marks that time will never erase. The warmth of her presence, the clarity of her voice, the subtle determination in her eyes, all of it shapes the foundations of his character. The world around Caesar begins to shift again when he reaches adolescence. He is old enough now to attend larger gatherings, to witness the speeches that ripple through the forum like low thunder. One day, standing among the crowd, he hears a magistrate speak with such conviction that the very air seems to vibrate. The man's words are sharp, delivered with precision, yet what captures Caesar is not the rhetoric, but the reaction, the soft gasp of an elder, the quiet nod of a tradesman, the almost imperceptible tightening of a rival's jaw. It is then that he realizes the true power of speech is not in sound, but in the silence it leaves afterward. By now, he is taller, more assured, though still guided by thought rather than impulse. His footsteps echo differently in the halls of his home, firmer, slower, more deliberate. The candles cast longer shadows as he studies late into the night. When he reads of heroes or leaders, it is no longer with childish awe, but with careful comparison. He wonders not only who they were, but how they became who they were. He senses that greatness is not a stroke of fortune, but a weaving of countless small decisions. And so, through these early years, through the rustle of scrolls, the fragrance of incense, the murmur of political tension, Caesar's ambition grows quietly, like a candle gaining strength in still air. It is not yet a flame that seeks the world. It is simply a light within him, steady and patient, waiting for the winds that will one day turn it into fire. Part 3. Exile, Loss, and the Shape of Resolve. The years move forward with a quiet but inevitable rhythm, and as you return to Caesar's life, you find him approaching an age where innocence begins to thin. The Rome he grew up admiring now reveals a harsher edge. The political winds grow colder, carrying whispers that slide through alleyways like pale threads of smoke. Even the familiar streets he once walked with playful curiosity now feel different, heavier, more watchful, as though the city itself is bracing for what is to come. The shadow behind this change is Sulla, a man whose rise leaves a chill across the Republic. His name begins to appear in hushed conversations, carrying the dry scent of fear. Caesar, still young, but no longer sheltered, feels the shift like a tremor beneath polished marble floors. One evening, at a family gathering lit by soft lamps and bowls of figs, he notices Aurelia's hand tighten slightly when someone mentions the growing purges. It is a small gesture, almost invisible, but to Caesar It lands with the clarity of a dropped coin echoing against stone. He is newly married to Cornelia now, a gentle yet resolute woman whose presence warms the quiet corners of his life. Their home smells of clean linen, crushed herbs, and the faint sweetness of fruit left to ripen in terracotta bowls. Caesar finds comfort in these simple rituals, the brush of Cornelia's sleeve against his arm, the soft glow of lamplight on her face, the steady rhythm of domestic life. But the world beyond their doorway grows sharper each day, like iron being honed for an unseen purpose. Sulla's demands soon strike directly at Caesar. In the cool of an early morning, when the city is still half asleep, messengers arrive with an ultimatum that cuts through the silence: renounce Cornelia or face the consequences. The order carries more than political weight. It threatens the very foundation of the life Caesar has begun to build. The statement is simple, almost calm, but beneath it lies the cold truth that defiance could mean exile, ruin, or death. Inside the atrium, where the first light of dawn pools on the mosaic tiles, Caesar considers the choice. The room smells faintly of last night's smoke and damp stone. The house is quiet except for the faint rustling of servants waking. He touches the edge of a marble column, its surface chilled by the night air. The texture steadies him. He refuses. The decision is not shouted, not even spoken with force. It is a quiet answer, firm as a breath, drawn slowly through clenched resolve. Sulla responds the way a storm responds to defiance. Caesar's property is seized. His safety dissolves. Overnight, Rome becomes a city of watchers. The clatter of armored footsteps echoes more frequently through the streets. The smell of burning incense at temples blends with something colder, a tension that hangs in the air like winter fog. Caesar disappears into the margins of Rome, slipping through narrow alleyways where lamplight barely touches the walls. Friends hide him in storage rooms and dim back courtyards, offering bread and rough wool blankets. He sleeps lightly, listening to the soft creak of doors and the distant thud of soldiers moving through the night. Eventually he flees, escaping Rome in the pale hours before dawn. The road ahead is uneven beneath his sandals, dusty and cold from the night's breath. The countryside stretches around him in muted tones, olive trees rustling with a dry whisper, distant farm smoke rising in thin, crooked lines. Every sound seems amplified: the crunch of gravel, the heartbeat-like rhythm of his own footsteps, the weary sigh of a mule pulling a nearby cart. This exile is not marked by dramatic pursuit, but by stillness, by the quiet weight of uncertainty pressing against him like a damp cloak. Weeks pass in a blur of movement. He meets sympathizers, old family connections, and strangers who help him without ever asking his name. In one village, an elderly couple offers him shelter. Their home is simple, a single oil lamp flickering against clay walls, the air scented with boiling lentils. Caesar rests his hands on the worn wooden table, feeling the grain beneath his fingertips. It is a humble moment, yet he can sense something shifting within him, an understanding that comfort and fragility are intertwined, and that power is never as distant from suffering as it appears. During this time, his resolve strengthens. The world strips away the last remnants of his youth, leaving him with a sharpened clarity. He reflects on his life, on Aurelia's unwavering discipline, on Cornelia's devotion, on the murmurs he once heard in the forum about courage and duty. The lessons return to him, not as abstract ideas, but as living truths. He realizes that leadership is not built in marble halls. It is forged in moments of fear, hunger, and displacement, in the quiet endurance of hardship. Eventually, Sulla relents. Influential friends plead for Caesar, insisting the young man is too insignificant to pose a threat. The words are meant as dismissal, but they grant him a path home. When Caesar returns to Rome, the city feels both familiar and strangely distant. The streets carry the scent of olive oil and dust, but also lingering traces of violence. Columns he once touched with childish wonder now stand as silent witnesses to the Republic's turmoil. He walks with careful steps, feeling the cool stone beneath him like an old memory returned. Back in his mother's house, the lamplight falls softly across Aurelia's face as she embraces him. Cornelia's eyes fill with relief, her smile warm enough to dissolve the frost of exile. Yet even in this quiet reunion, Caesar senses that something inside him has changed. The boy, who once marveled at Rome, has become a man forged by its dangers. The air around him feels different, denser, carrying the unspoken truth that survival is no longer enough. Something deeper now pushes at the edges of his thoughts, like a tide preparing to swell. In the dim hours before dawn, he stands alone in the courtyard, the sky still purple with night. The fountain trickles softly, its rhythm steady, patient. Caesar closes his eyes, feeling the cool air against his skin, the faint smell of wet stone rising from the tiles. He is home, but he is no longer the same. Exile has etched new lines within him, quiet but indelible. It has shaped his resolve, given form to a purpose he does not yet fully name. This, more than any honor or title, becomes the first true turning point in his life, the moment when Julius Caesar understands that the world can take everything from a man, and that he can still choose who he will become. Part 4. A rising voice in a restless republic. As you return to Caesar's story, imagine Rome not as a distant monument, but as a living body, a city whose streets are veins and whose buildings are bones, carrying the quiet strain of an aging republic. Caesar has come back from exile changed, the soft edges of youth worn into something sharper and more deliberate. He moves now through familiar spaces with a new awareness, feeling the tension in the air like a faint vibration under his feet. The city smells of dust and olive oil, of damp stone in shaded courtyards, of smoke from small street braziers curling up into the pale sky. Market stalls still rattle open at dawn, and the forum still fills with the low murmur of argument and trade. But beneath these ordinary sounds lies something tighter, almost metallic, the sense that Rome is listening to itself more intently, watching every word, weighing every gesture. It is in this atmosphere that Caesar begins to find his voice. He starts with the law courts, spaces where voices can cut deeper than swords. The basilicas, where trials are held, are cool and shadowed, their high ceilings trapping echoes of past judgments. The polished floors reflect faint glimmers of light from the clerestory windows, and the air carries the mingled scents of wax tablets, wool cloaks dampened by morning mist, and the faint tang of ink. Here, Caesar stands up as an advocate, championing those who suffered under Sulla's harsh prescriptions. His speeches are not thunderous or wild. They are measured, carefully woven, each phrase laid down like a smooth stone in a path. Listeners notice his clarity first, the way his words seem to clean the fog from a room, revealing motives and injustices that others prefer to leave hidden. When he speaks, his hands move sparingly, but his eyes are alive, seeing more than he says. The rustle of the crowd quiets, then stills altogether. You can almost hear the tiny creak of wooden benches as men lean forward to catch every word. Opponents dismiss him at first. He is still young, still untested in high office. But youth and prior danger have given him a certain fearlessness. He has already faced exile and the threat of death. A courtroom holds no real terror. His courage is subdued, almost gentle, but it radiates through his arguments. He dares to prosecute powerful former governors for corruption and extortion, speaking on behalf of those whose names barely register in Rome's public memory. The marble columns looming behind him seem to absorb his voice, then lend it back to him with added weight. Outside the courts, Caesar cultivates alliances with methodical patience. He understands that Rome runs not only on law and custom, but on relationships, favors, and memories. In dimly lit dining rooms scented with wine and roasted herbs, he sits at low tables beside men of influence, listening more than he speaks. Platters of figs and honeyed cheese pass between them, the clink of cups punctuating conversations that glide from pleasantries to politics. He leaves these evenings not only having eaten, but having measured every smile and every pause. He also begins to take on small offices, the first rungs of the cursus honorum. Each role is modest, but each places him where he can observe the machinery of the Republic up close. He supervises minor rituals, oversees local administrative tasks, and gains a reputation for discipline and fairness. In dusty records rooms, he runs his hand along shelves crowded with scrolls, feeling the rough edges of twine and worn papyrus. These are the quiet chambers where Rome's decisions are recorded and forgotten, and he studies them with the same care he once gave to his school lessons. Yet his ambitions do not harden into cold calculation. At this stage of his life, there is still warmth and vulnerability in him. His grief for Cornelia, whose early death leaves a deep, private wound, never fully dissolves. At her funeral rites, the air is heavy with the smell of smoke and wilted flowers. The torches cast trembling light over faces drawn in sorrow. Here, Caesar's voice rises again, this time not in prosecution or policy, but in mourning. His eulogy is soft yet piercing, weaving her memory into the wider story of Rome, into family, duty, and loss. Those who stand there, listening to him speak over her, notice something different. He does not weep openly, but his words carry a quiet ache, an understanding that even strong men are shaped by love and bereavement. His voice does not shake. Instead, it wraps itself around the silence, turning private pain into collective reflection. This ability to turn something deeply personal into something universally understood will mark him for the rest of his life. The republic he serves remains restless. Street rumors drift like dust motes in sunlight. Talk of debt, of land, of veterans who feel forgotten, of nobles who cling too tightly to privilege. When Caesar walks through the forum now, he feels these murmurs pressing around him. He hears the complaints of shopkeepers, the cautious questions of small landholders, the quiet frustrations of soldiers returning from distant campaigns. Their words stick to him like fine powder on skin, impossible to brush away. He aligns himself more clearly with the populares, those who claim to speak for the common people. It is not a reckless choice, it is deliberate. He sees that Rome will not hold together by clinging only to the past. In meetings lit by single lamps, with walls smelling of lime plaster and old smoke, he talks strategy with allies who share his concerns. Their plans are written not on freshly polished stone, but on wax that can be smoothed and rewritten, adjusted to the changing balance of power. Seeking to refine his oratory further, Caesar spends time away from Rome, studying under renowned teachers, learning how to shape emotion with precision. In quiet rooms by the sea, he practices speaking while waves crash rhythmically against the shore outside. The salty air drifts in through open windows, mixing with the scent of ink, parchment, and oil lamps. The lessons are demanding, but he embraces them with the same steadiness that carried him through exile. Every exercise, every repetition, adds another subtle layer to the instrument of his voice. By the time he returns again, Rome recognizes him not only as a survivor of Sulla's vengeance, but as a rising figure whose words command attention. His presence in the forum is now a familiar sight. The fall of his toga, the deliberate pace of his steps, the way he pauses before speaking, as though listening for the city's own heartbeat. He is not yet at the summit of power, not even close, but the path toward it is beginning to take shape beneath his feet. At night, when the city grows quieter and the oil lamps burn lower, Caesar often stands near the edges of the forum, looking up at the dark shapes of temples silhouetted against the sky. The stars above Rome seem faint, softened by the light of countless hearths. The stone beneath him feels cool and steady. In these moments, He is just one man among many, a single figure in a vast, bustling world. Yet inside him, something continues to gather, a calm certainty that his life will not remain small, that the voice he has learned to wield will one day shape more than trials and speeches. The Republic is uneasy, but it still holds, for now Caesar's role is to move within its currents, not to break them. His rising influence is like a low, steady note in a piece of music, barely noticeable at first, but always there, deep in the background. And as Rome drifts toward changes it cannot yet name, his quiet voice in a restless city is slowly becoming impossible to ignore. Part 5. Roads, paved in dust and laurel. As you rejoin Caesar's life, imagine the Republic spread out before him like a vast mosaic, each province a colored tile, each frontier a line pressed into the surface by centuries of ambition. He is older now, stepping beyond Rome's tight, whispering halls into a wider world of stone roads, distant winds, and landscapes that speak in different dialects of power. The air around him feels broader, filled with the scent of travel, warm dust, mules' leather harnesses, the faint tang of metal from a soldier's gear. It is here, away from the city's marble colonnades, that Caesar will experience the first real taste of command. His early postings are modest but essential. They carry him along Rome's arteries, roads that stretch straight and unwavering toward distant mountains. At dawn, when the world is pale and quiet, he rides with a small escort past fields silvered with morning dew. The breeze is cool, carrying the scent of pine resin from nearby hills. His cloak brushes gently against the flank of his horse. The rhythm of hooves against packed earth becomes a familiar sound, a steady pulse that reminds him he is no longer confined to Rome's political chamber. His first major assignment comes in Asia Minor, where he is tasked with diplomatic duties and supporting Rome's allies. It is a land of heat and stone, where sun-baked cities rise like mirages along the coastline. The markets hum with voices speaking Greek, Latin, and dialects Caesar strains to decipher. The air is heavy with the smell of figs, salted fish, and incense burned at small altars along the streets. Walking through these cities, he feels something shift inside, a realization that Rome's reach extends far beyond its own walls, that the world he once knew is only a fraction of the world he must master. During one of these journeys across the Aegean, he encounters a moment that will be retold for centuries, but it begins quietly enough. His ship sails over gentle waters, the sunlight flickering across its surface like scattered coins. The smell of salt clings to his cloak. The boards creak softly beneath his feet. Then, in a sudden rush of motion and shouting, Cilician pirates seize the vessel. Their boats scrape against his, ropes are thrown over the rails, and rough hands pull passengers aboard. The pirates do not know who he is. To them, he is simply a young Roman of good birth, valuable but not extraordinary. They demand a ransom. Caesar listens calmly, the faint breeze stirring his hair. When they name their price, he laughs softly, a sound so calm it surprises even himself. He tells them they should demand more, that a man of his status is worth a higher sum. The pirates, taken aback, raise the amount. He remains among them for weeks. The sea becomes his temporary world. Each morning, he wakes to the scent of brine and worn canvas, to the sound of waves tapping gently against the hull. Caesar moves about the deck with an ease that confuses his captors. He speaks to them with unshaken confidence, issuing small orders, joining their games, criticizing their songs. When he reads or writes by the dim glow of a lantern, they watch him in uneasy fascination. Yet the most striking detail is how he repeatedly, almost casually, tells them that when he is free, he will return and have them crucified. He says it not as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact, delivered with the clarity of a man announcing the time of day. They laugh each time, not realizing that Beneath his calm tone lies a resolve, like coiled steel. When the ransom eventually arrives and he is released, Caesar does exactly as he promised. He raises a small force, sets out across the coastline, and captures the pirates with swift precision. The air along the shore smells of tar, seaweed, and distant rainfall. After delivering them to the authorities, he returns to oversee the executions himself, not out of cruelty, but out of a belief that Rome's order must be upheld. Yet even here, his humanity surfaces. He arranges for their throats to be cut before crucifixion, a small mercy in a harsh world. This episode marks something important. It shows a part of Caesar seldom seen in his early years: the firmness of his will, the cool stillness of his conviction, the seamless blend of empathy and authority. Command is no longer abstract. It is something he has tasted, rough, unpredictable, and edged with consequence. Later, in Spain, he takes on a position as quaestor, serving under a governor tasked with managing the region. Spain is rugged country, filled with dry winds, red earth, and hills dotted with olive trees whose leaves flicker like silver in the sun. Caesar rides through villages where homes smell of bread baked in clay ovens, through towns where Roman influence mixes with older, local traditions. He handles accounts, supervises logistics, oversees minor disputes. These tasks might seem small, but they give him a new understanding of the Republic's innermost workings. One moment in Spain stays with him for the rest of his life. While visiting a small coastal town, he stands before a statue of Alexander the Great. The sea breeze cools his face, carrying the scent of salt and wet stone. He stares at the young conqueror's carved features and feels a quiet ache move through him. Alexander died at 32. Caesar is older now than Alexander was when he had already conquered so much. The realization presses against him like a cold hand on his chest. He is no longer content with minor posts or local duties. Ambition, once a candle inside him, now burns with the steady heat of a lamp that will not be extinguished. When he returns to Rome, he steps onto familiar stones with a different rhythm. The forum's voices wash over him, merchants shouting prices, politicians debating land laws, priests chanting at shrines. But beneath the urban noise, he hears something else: an invitation. The Republic is shifting again, and there are cracks forming in the old structures. Caesar can feel the path forward, not fully visible, but unmistakably present, like a road disappearing into morning haze. He resumes public life with newfound momentum. His speeches carry sharper focus. His alliances form more quickly. He walks through Rome as though the city has widened around him, the space between its buildings imbued with fresh possibility. Yet he does so with quiet calm, never rushing, never raising his voice more than necessary. His ambition grows, but it grows with discipline. In these years, Caesar learned something essential: that power is not seized all at once. It is gathered, grain by grain, like dust on a traveler's cloak. It comes from experience softened by hardship, from mercy tempered by judgment, from choices made in quiet rooms where only the faint flicker of lamplight bears witness. And as Rome approaches another cycle of political storms, the man who once hid from Sulla's wrath now walks openly through the forum, steadier, wiser, and more prepared than ever for the roads that lie ahead. Part 6. The Triumvir's Handshake in the Shadows. As you return to Caesar's unfolding life, imagine Rome at twilight, its marble facades washed in pale lavender light, its streets humming with the low and restless pulse of a republic that has begun to stretch thin under the weight of its own ambitions. Caesar walks through this atmosphere with a grounded calm, the soles of his sandals tapping softly against stone worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The air smells of warm dust, hearth smoke drifting from upper windows, and the faint sweetness of figs laid out on late market stalls. Rome is familiar to him now, yet it feels different, more brittle, more charged. Something new is is taking shape beneath its surface. Caesar steps forward along the political ladder with deliberate ease. As Adol, he organizes games and public festivals that fill the city with the clatter of wagons, the bright shimmer of decorations, the murmur of crowds gathering under banners swaying in the breeze. Torches flicker at night as citizens move toward the arenas, their faces illuminated in amber tones. People begin to speak his name with appreciation, then enthusiasm. They remember the generous entertainments, the careful management of public spaces, the sense of dignity he restores to ceremonies that had grown neglected. But popularity alone cannot lift a man through Rome's tangled hierarchy. Beneath the music, the cheering crowds, and the scent of spilled wine soaking into wooden planks, Caesar watches the Republic's deeper fractures widening. Two figures cast long shadows across its politics: Marcus Crassus, wealthier than entire provinces, and Gnaeus Pompey, whose military brilliance stirs admiration from legionaries and senators alike. Both men are powerful, but both carry unmet needs, desires Rome cannot satisfy alone. Caesar sees this with keen perception. In quiet rooms lit by a single lamp, where plaster walls glow with faint warmth, and the air smells of olive oil and damp parchment, he considers the possibilities. He knows Pompey struggles with the Senate's reluctance to grant land to his veterans. Crassus, for all his fortune, wants recognition and influence that money alone cannot buy. Caesar himself needs support, financial, political, and symbolic. He realizes that their ambitions, though different, can fit together like pieces of a mosaic. When the three finally meet, it happens not in a grand hall, but in a shaded villa garden. Olive branches sway overhead, casting shifting patterns of light across the paving stones. The breeze carries the scent of crushed leaves and distant cooking fires. Caesar enters the meeting with the steady calm he has been cultivating since exile. Pompey stands with the bearing of a soldier accustomed to command, his cloak stirring lightly in the wind. Crassus, confident and calculating, watches with quiet interest, accustomed to measuring men as he measures investment. Their agreement is not sealed with grand ceremony. It happens slowly, through spoken concerns softened into mutual promises, through a recognition that none can achieve what all three together can secure. The triumvirate, informal, fragile, immensely powerful, is born in these hushed conversations. Caesar feels the weight of it settle into the air like a slow-moving tide. It is an alliance formed not from friendship, but from necessity, made solid in the shadows where Rome cannot see. With their support, Caesar runs for consul. The campaign unfolds across bustling streets where vendors call out prices in hoarse voices, where laundresses hang wet linens that flap like pale banners in the wind. Caesar moves through the crowds with confident ease, shaking hands, listening to grievances, promising reforms. He understands that power is not contained in marble chambers. It lives in the small exchanges between people whose names will never be carved into stone. He wins the consulship with clarity. On the morning of his inauguration, Rome feels softer under the winter sun. The air is crisp, carrying the smell of fresh wool and warm bread. Senators gather in their white togas, their footsteps echoing lightly against the steps of the Curia. Caesar stands at the center, a calm figure amid the swirl of public life. His eyes take in the scene with quiet comprehension. He has reached a threshold, one he will never return from. His consulship is marked by bold reforms. He passes land distributions for Pompey's veterans, earning the general's loyalty. He revises procedures and laws, smoothing inefficiencies with the precision of a man who once studied every corner of Rome, Longus, administrative machinery. His opponents grumble, whispering accusations of overreach, but the people feel the changes, tangible, immediate. woven into their daily lives like threads of warm cloth. Yet, it is a single personal decision that reveals Caesar's political acuity most clearly: his marriage to Calpurnia and his daughter Julia's marriage to Pompey. These unions, simple in ceremony, carry the scent of fresh flowers and incense drifting through the atrium. Julia's gentle demeanor softens Pompey's public edge. The bond between their families wraps the alliance in warmth, creating a sense of stability that Rome desperately needs. Still, the triumvirate does not exist without tension. Crassus and Pompey, both giants in their own spheres, feel the weight of each other's presence. Caesar navigates between them with calm precision, offering balance through charm, persuasion, and subtlety. Nights in Rome are filled with quiet negotiations behind closed doors, where wine cups glimmer in lamplight and voices fall to hushed tones. Caesar's role becomes that of a soft-spoken conductor, guiding the tempo of relationships that could unravel with a single misstep. Toward the end of his consulship, he orchestrates the passage of a law granting him command in Gaul. The decision unfolds in the Senate, amid the faint rustling of scrolls and the measured cadence of formal speeches. Outside, the streets are filled with dust stirred by passing carts, the smell of fresh hay, the steady hum of city life. Caesar knows the significance of what has been set in motion. Gaul is large, wild, unpredictable. It is also an opportunity, vast enough to shape the rest of his life. On his final day as consul, he walks through the forum as the last rays of sunlight strike the tops of its temples. The shadows grow long on the paving stones, stretching toward him like quiet reminders of the path he has chosen. Rome's skyline glows with soft amber light. The conversations of passing citizens drift into the air like distant waves. Caesar breathes in the scent of the city, stone warmed by the day, smoke from late cook fires, the faint breeze that always seems to move between Rome's oldest columns. He is no longer a young advocate finding his place in courtrooms. He is no longer the exiled youth slipping through back alleys. He is a statesman, a negotiator, a figure toward whom the Republic now subtly tilts. The triumvir's handshake, delicate, powerful, fragile, has given him his next horizon. Soon he will leave Rome behind. Soon he will face the winds of Gaul. But tonight, as the city falls into quiet, Caesar remains a calm shadow beneath Rome's ancient sky, steady, thoughtful, and prepared for the long road ahead. Part 7. Storms over the Helvetian Trail. As you return to Caesar's life, picture the edges of Rome fading behind him, its marble columns shrinking into memory as he steps into a world of forests, mountains, and cold winds that carry the scent of pine and distant storms. Gaul lies before him now, vast and unsettled, a land where rivers carve deep scars through dark soil and where tribes live beneath skies that seem larger and wilder than anything Rome can contain. The moment he crosses Rome's northern frontier, something shifts around him, as though the air itself recognizes a new chapter beginning. Caesar rides with a small retinue, their cloaks snapping softly behind them in the breeze. The road beneath their horses is nothing like the polished stones of Rome. It is rough, muddy in places, and bordered by thick forests where tall trunks rise like silent sentinels. Birds call from the branches with sharp, unpredictable cries. The smell of damp earth and crushed leaves clings to the air. His men feel the weight of the unknown ahead, but Caesar remains calm, studying the landscape with a measured gaze. Gaul is not a single entity, but a tapestry woven from many tribes, each with its own customs, leaders, and rivalries. Caesar sees opportunity in this complexity, in the spaces between alliances, in the tensions waiting to be redirected. He listens closely to scouts who bring reports of shifting movements and uneasy rumors. The Helvetii, a large tribe pressed by hunger and pressure from neighboring peoples, begin to migrate en masse, their entire nation moving like a slow, massive tide across the continent. They seek new lands, but their path threatens Rome's territories and allies. When Caesar receives news of their migration, he stands on a small ridge overlooking a river that glimmers silvery blue under a clouded sky. The air is cool, carrying the sharp scent of water and moss. His hand rests lightly on the hilt of his sword, not with aggression, but with contemplation. The Helvetii are not merely a danger, they are a test. Their movement will set the tone for everything that follows in Gaul. He returns to his camp, where leather tents flap quietly in the wind and soldiers tend to campfires that send thin trails of smoke into the air. The atmosphere is patient but expectant. The smell of wood smoke mixes with the earthy aroma of boiling grains. Caesar walks among his men, offering small nods of acknowledgement, feeling the rhythm of the camp as if tuning his thoughts to its pace. He orders defenses to be built, a wall stretching miles along the Rhone, a barrier of earth and timber forming a silent message. Rome holds this line. The construction takes days. The ground vibrates with the pounding of picks and shovels. The scent of fresh-cut wood hangs heavy in the air. Soldiers haul stone under the pale sun, sweat mingling with dust on their skin. Caesar oversees the work with a steady presence, his cloak brushing gently against the grass as he moves between groups. He speaks rarely, but when he does, his tone is clear, calm, and resolute. When the Helvetii attempt to negotiate passage, Caesar meets their envoys in a field softened by early morning light. Dew clings to the grass, shining like countless tiny mirrors. The air is quiet, punctuated only by the distant calls of crows. The delegates stand with pride, carrying the weight of their migrating people. Caesar listens politely, but his decision is unwavering. Their passage is denied. The envoys leave with stiff gestures, their footsteps fading into the soft rustle of the wind. Soon after, the first clashes begin. The battles in these early months are not grand or legendary. They are scattered, tense, shaped by terrain and weather. Skirmishes unfold in forests where shafts of sunlight pierce the canopy in thin golden streams. The ground is damp, scattered with twigs that snap under hurried footsteps. Caesar's legions move with discipline, their shields glinting faintly in the shifting light. When they march, the sound rises like a low, steady drum, boots pressing into the earth with unified strength. The Helvetii fight fiercely. Their warriors shout in harsh, rhythmic cries that echo between hillsides. Their swords flash in the sun. But Caesar's forces, drilled with precision, respond with quiet coordination. Commands pass down the lines like a ripple across calm water. The air fills with the muted clash of iron, the grunt of exertion, the scent of churned soil. Caesar watches from a vantage point, his expression focused but composed. He does not revel in violence. He studies it, guides it, shapes its outcome with methodical clarity. When the Helvetian migration is finally halted and negotiations begin again, Caesar sits beneath a broad tree, its leaves quivering in a gentle breeze. The earth beneath him is cool, dotted with fallen leaves. He listens to their leaders, who speak with exhaustion but also dignity. The outcome is firm but fair. The Helvetii may return to their ancestral lands under Rome's terms. It becomes clear to everyone watching that Caesar's power lies not only in battle, but in the balance between force and mercy. As weeks pass, Caesar becomes more attuned to the pulse of Gaul. He learns the rhythms of its rivers, how the Saône runs slow and glassy, reflecting clouds like drifting wool, how the Rhine roars with colder force, smelling of distant mountains. He notes the wind patterns across its plains, the shifting colors of its forests, the particular way mist hangs low in valleys at dawn. These sensory details are not distractions. They are the landscape's language, and Caesar listens to it with the curiosity of a man taking the measure of a new world. He also begins to understand that Gaul is not simply a military theater. It is a place where human fears, loyalties, and ambitions intersect. Local leaders come to his camp seeking protection or alliance. Their tents smell of unfamiliar oils and herbs. Their garments rustle with a texture unlike Roman wool. Caesar greets them calmly, offering hospitality, observing the nuances in their gestures and voices. He sees in them reflections of Rome's own political complexities, only shaped by different customs and landscapes. As the season shifts, the legions establish winter quarters. The nights in Gaul are long, cold, and quiet. Frost gathers on the edges of tents. Firelight flickers across the faces of soldiers who wrap themselves in thick cloaks. The air smells of smoke, damp wool, and boiling porridge. Caesar spends these evenings writing reports for the Senate, his quill scratching softly across parchment. The glow of a single lamp lights his hands. His thoughts move between battles fought and those yet to come, because Gaul is not yet Rome's. It is a vast land of potential storms, tribes watching, alliances shifting, futures uncertain, and Caesar knows that the quiet victories of these first months are only the beginning. Ahead lie deeper forests, darker skies, and challenges far greater than the Helvetian trail. But he remains steady, unhurried, and utterly present, a calm center within a land that has only just begun to reveal its edges. Part 8. Under the Broken Skies of Gaul. As you return to Caesar's story, imagine Gaul deepening around him, its forests thicker, its rivers darker, its winds carrying the rough scent of pine smoke and wet earth. The Helvetian migration was only the first tremor. Now the land lies before him like a vast untamed sea, its surface calm in some places, but beneath it currents swirl with rivalries, ambitions, and quiet fears. Caesar stands at the edge of this world with a measured stillness, knowing that the next years will test not only his strategy, but the entire shape of his resolve. Gaul's tribes do not move as one. Some watch him with curiosity, others with unease, and still others with the sharp gaze of ancient suspicion. The Aedui plead for protection, the Sequani harbor resentment. Farther north, Germanic warriors cross the Rhine, their arrival trembling through the land like a cold front pushing across a field. Caesar listens to reports brought in by scouts who ride through mud and rain. Their cloaks drip onto the tent floor, the water pooling in small reflective circles. The smell of damp leather and crushed grass fills the air each time they return. The legions march constantly now. The regular beat of their footsteps settles into the earth, leaving straight lines across landscapes untouched for generations. The sky overhead shifts between pale grays and bruised blues, clouds dragging shadows across hills where the air tastes of iron and morning frost. As the soldiers move, their armor clinks in a soft, repetitive rhythm, like wind chimes made of dull silver. Caesar rides alongside them, a calm figure against the restless backdrop, his gaze drifting across the horizon as though listening to something only he can hear. The wars with the Belgae begin not with a single spark, but with the slow tightening of tension. Tribes gather under banners painted with symbols old as their forests. Messengers move between villages, their sandals kicking up dust on roads that smell of wild herbs crushed underfoot. Caesar watches their movements carefully, mapping alliances in his mind with the precision of a man tracing constellations. He senses that the Belgae fight not merely for land, but for identity, for a way of life shaped by cold winters and thick woodland silence. The first major battle takes place near a riverbank where reeds sway in the wind and the water glimmers like melted glass. The morning is frigid, the air filled with the scent of dew and churned soil. Caesar's legions form tight ranks, their shields overlapping in a quiet geometry of discipline. Across the river, the Belgi gather in a dense mass, their voices rising in rough chants that echo across the valley like rolling thunder. The men on both sides can smell each other's campfires still lingering, feel the ground tremble faintly under shifting weight. Caesar gives his orders calm and precise. Trumpets sound, their notes cutting through the cold air with sharp clarity. Arrows arc overhead in silent, graceful lines. The clash that follows is fierce, but controlled, Romans pushing forward in measured steps, tribal forces pressing back with raw strength. The sounds blend into a single, layered noise, metal hitting wood, the grunt of effort, the soft thud of bodies falling onto damp grass. Through it all, Caesar watches from a slight rise in the terrain, the wind tugging at the hem of his cloak. His face remains composed, his eyes keen, absorbing every shift in the battle's rhythm. The Belgi eventually break, retreating into forests where branches snap under hurried feet and the shadows swallow fleeing figures. Caesar does not chase recklessly. Instead, he has bridges reinforced, supply lines secured, and scouts dispatched into the dense woods. He advances with a quiet patience, understanding that victory means little if not supported by meticulous order. The soldiers respect this in him, the way he walks among their tents at night, nodding gently, checking their needs, listening to small concerns. His presence by the campfires carries warmth even when the wind grows bitter. Further north, the Nervi rise, a tribe fierce, disciplined, and unyielding. Their lands are thick with dense thickets where light barely reaches the forest floor. Caesar's legions march through this region cautiously, their boots sinking slightly into soft ground, layered with fallen leaves. The air smells of sap and cold bark. The Nervi choose their moment well, launching an ambush that crashes upon the Romans like a sudden storm. For a fleeting moment, chaos ripples across Caesar's lines. He steps forward into the fray, raising his shield, his voice steady as he calls out commands. Soldiers rally around him, the panic dissolving into renewed formation. Even in the noise, the clang of swords, the crack of branches, the sharp cry of wounded men, there is a strange clarity. Caesar moves like a fixed point in a shifting landscape, anchoring the legions with presence alone. Slowly the Romans regain control, pushing the Nervi back until the forest grows quiet again, its shadows returning to stillness. When the battle ends, the field is strewn with broken spears and trampled grass. The air hangs heavy with the smell of earth and rain. Caesar walks among the wounded, offering quiet words, his cloak brushing softly against the ground. He understands the cost of these moments, the weight of each life, and though necessity drives him, compassion tempers his judgment. His men notice this, storing it quietly in their regard for him, a trust that cannot be commanded, only earned. As seasons pass, Caesar's campaigns continue, weaving across Gaul in loops of strategy and endurance. He holds councils with tribal leaders in smoke-filled tents where the air feels thick with unspoken calculations. He sends letters to Rome by courier, their wax seals warm from the lanterns under which he writes. The Senate receives his reports with mixed feelings, admiration tinged with unease. Power, after all, always shifts the air around it. One of Caesar's most symbolic acts occurs at the Rhine. The Germanic tribes linger just beyond the river, their presence a murmur of threat. Caesar studies the water's flow, its cold current sliding relentlessly eastward. He decides not simply to cross with boats, but to build a bridge, an act of engineering that becomes its own message. For 10 days the legions work, their hammering echoing across the riverbanks. The smell of freshly cut timber fills the air, mixing with the metallic scent of nails and wet rope. When the bridge stands completed, Caesar crosses quietly with a portion of his forces. No grand speeches, no unnecessary violence. He remains only long enough to demonstrate Rome's reach, then withdraws, dismantling the bridge piece by piece. The gesture ripples across tribes on both sides of the river, carried like a cold wind through forests and halls. Each victory, each negotiation, each march across Gaul shapes Caesar's reputation. He becomes not only a commander, but a figure whispered about near campfires, steady in storms, sharp in strategy, calm in the face of unpredictability. The land itself seems to recognize him now, its winds brushing gently past, as though carrying a faint acknowledgement. Yet Gaul is vast, and storms still gather at its edges. Caesar feels them coming, not with fear, but with the quiet readiness of a man who has learned to walk through changing weather without losing his pace. Ahead lie deeper challenges, revolts, rivalries, shifting loyalties, and the first hints of Rome's own discomfort with his growing power. For now, under the broken skies of Gaul, he remains its steady center, unhurried, unshaken, and entirely aware that the greatest tests are only beginning to form on the horizon. Part 9. Rubicon, a river of cold fire. As you return to Caesar's life, imagine Gaul slowly falling behind him, not as a single moment, but as a long fading breath. Years of campaigns have carved deep lines into the land and into Caesar himself. The forests, the rivers, the icy winds that once felt foreign now cling to him like familiar shadows. Yet, as the legions settle into winter quarters and the fires crackle softly under thick woolen cloaks, Caesar senses a new tension rising, not from Gaul, but from Rome, distant yet ever present, like a low hum at the edge of hearing. Reports from the capital arrive on thin sheets of parchment, their corners curled from travel. The messengers bring the scent of Roman streets embedded in their cloaks, warm dust, incense, the faint perfume of crowded markets. But the words they carry are colder. The Senate grows uneasy. Pompey, once ally, once family through Julia, now stands in quiet opposition. Caesar reads each letter slowly, the oil lamp beside him throwing long, trembling shadows that flicker across the canvas walls of his tent. The atmosphere inside his quarters is calm, but weighted. The air smells faintly of aging parchment and damp wool. Outside, snow settles in soft layers over the camp, muffling the world. Caesar stands for long moments by the entrance, watching flakes drift silently to the ground. He can feel the direction of things shifting, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Rome is no longer a distant center waiting for his return. It is becoming a storm gathering along the horizon. He thinks often of Julia, whose death years earlier had broken one of the last threads binding him to Pompey. The memory arrives gently, like a breeze stirring the edge of his cloak. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the fire burns low and the cold presses inward, he remembers her soft voice, the warmth of her presence, the way she tempered the sharp edges between two powerful men. Without her, the space between Caesar and Pompey widens into something colder, more brittle, harder to bridge. Caesar holds command in Gaul, but Rome wants him to relinquish it, surrender his legions, return alone, face judgment engineered by rivals who fear his popularity. The message is presented as law, but its tone smells of calculation, like parchment scraped too clean, hiding something beneath. Caesar reads it carefully. He sets the scroll aside. He breathes in. The tent is silent, except for the faint crackle of the fire. In the days that follow, he walks among his soldiers, their armor glinting dully under winter light. They gather around him with the steady, quiet trust of men who have marched beside him through forests thick with fog and across fields where the air tasted of iron. Their faces are weathered, their voices rough from cold nights, but their eyes follow him with unspoken loyalty. They would follow him back to Rome. They would follow him into the unknown. He asks for nothing, yet he feels the weight of their devotion settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. As he prepares to leave Gaul, the landscape seems to shift in tone. Rivers he once bridged now flow quietly past, their surfaces reflecting gray skies. Forest paths that echoed with the sounds of marching feet now stand still. Villages visited in haste or negotiation feel distant, wrapped in winter mist. Caesar senses the land receding like a dream that clings in fragments but begins to blur at the edges. His mind is already turning southward, toward the city that once welcomed him with bright marble and warm light. The journey south is slow, the roads muddy with melted snow. The legions march with steady discipline, their breaths forming soft clouds in the cold morning air. Campfires at night glow like scattered stars across the countryside, each one crackling softly, sending embers drifting upward to vanish into the darkness. Caesar writes letters by lamplight, his quill moving with thoughtful precision. The scent of smoke clings to his fingers. Some letters he sends, others he burns. The Rubicon lies ahead, a narrow river, calm, almost unremarkable, yet its name carries a weight felt throughout the Republic. Crossing it with an army is forbidden. It is a border not just of land, but of loyalty, of law, of destiny. When Caesar reaches its banks, the sky is a muted gray, the air crisp with the scent of cold water and winter earth. The river flows softly, barely making a sound, its surface rippling lightly as though stirred by a breath rather than a current. He dismounts and walks to the edge. The stones beneath his sandals are slick with moisture. He crouches, dips a hand into the water. It is icy, almost biting. The sensation travels up his arm, sharp but awakening. His men behind him wait in silence, their breaths rising in faint plumes. No one speaks. Even the wind seems to pause, as if the world is listening for something. Caesar's thoughts drift, back to his childhood mornings under Rome's pale light, to Cornelia's quiet smile, to the courtroom where he first stood as a young advocate, to the pirate ship rocking gently under the Mediterranean sun, to the heavy forests of Gaul, where fog clung to his cloak. His life has been shaped by choices both gentle and severe, by moments of mercy and moments of resolve. Now he stands before another choice, one clean and sharp as the winter air. He knows what awaits him: conflict, danger, the unraveling of friendships, the shifting of Rome's entire structure. Yet beneath the uncertainty lies a deeper clarity. Returning to Rome defenseless would not preserve the Republic. It would simply deliver him to those who fear him. The river's calm surface mirrors the clarity in his mind. He rises slowly. His cloak stirs in the cold breeze. He looks back at his men, silent, steady, waiting. Caesar speaks softly, his voice steady as the river itself. The words are simple, unadorned, yet they carry the weight of all that has led to this moment. They feel less like a declaration than an acknowledgement of the path already chosen. Then he steps forward. The water parts around his feet, darkening the hem of his sandals. His horse follows. The legions, after a breath of stillness, begin to move. The sound of their march across the river is muted, splashes softened by the cold air, the rustle of cloaks brushing against armor, the quiet thud of hooves on wet stones. The Rubicon is shallow, but its crossing is immense. On the far side, the wind seems to shift. The sky feels different. The land ahead seems to exhale as though welcoming him into a future that Rome has tried to deny him, but cannot avoid. Behind him, Gaul fades. Before him, Rome waits, uncertain, divided, watchful. And Caesar, calm and unhurried, walks into destiny with the quiet assurance of a man who has learned to carry storms inside his own stillness. Part 10. A Republic sleeping on the edge of war. As you return to Caesar's story, imagine Rome trembling between two breaths, caught in that fragile space where night has not fully surrendered to dawn. The Republic, once firm as carved marble, now feels brittle, as though the faintest touch could fracture it. Caesar has crossed the Rubicon. But war has not yet exploded. Instead, it spreads like a slow, cold wind through Italy, filling each valley and each forum with a sense of quiet, suspended anticipation. Caesar's march southward is not a thunderous advance, but a measured, deliberate movement. The roads are winter-worn, their stones slick with frost, the surrounding fields brushed with pale morning light. Villages wake to the soft rhythm of distant footsteps, the steady cadence of legions moving with calm determination. The smell of cold earth mixes with wood smoke rising from hearths as families peer through cracked shutters, unsure whether to fear or welcome the arriving soldiers. But something unusual happens. Cities surrender peacefully, gates open without resistance. Towns that once seemed tightly bound to Pompey's faction now greet Caesar not with hostility, but with cautious respect. His reputation from Gaul precedes him like a warm lantern carried through darkness. The people have heard of his fairness, his patience, his ability to listen. Many remember the grain distributions, the legal reforms, the sense of presence he carried even before he marched north. He moves through these towns with restrained grace. In Ariminum, the first city taken after the Rubicon, Caesar speaks to trembling magistrates in a courtyard scented with damp leaves and old brick. His tone is soft, almost reassuring. He promises order, protection, stability. The citizens exhale, tension dissolving from their faces like frost melting under midday sun. The atmosphere is not triumphant. It is calm, steady, filled with the faint scent of olive oil lamps and the distant murmur of reopened markets. Meanwhile, Pompey flees south, gathering senators and loyal forces. It is not cowardice, it is calculation. He knows Caesar's pace, knows the weight of the legions that follow him. The two men were once bound by family ties, by shared victories, by the soft laughter of Julia who bridged their worlds. Now they are shadows moving on opposite sides of Italy, each one pulled by forces too large for personal history to overcome. Caesar progresses with his characteristic precision. In every city, he takes care to calm the population. His soldiers move with discipline, no plunder, no cruelty, no unnecessary displays of force. At night, campfires burn steadily along the outskirts of settlements, their warm light flickering against rows of tents. The scent of broth simmers through the air, mixing with the earthy aroma of trampled grass. Caesar walks the perimeter, offering nods of acknowledgement, his cloak trailing softly behind him. The legions draw quiet confidence from his presence, a silent understanding that they are part of something larger than conflict. When Caesar reaches Corfinium, he encounters the first real resistance. The city's leaders, hardened supporters of Pompey, shut the gates and prepare for a siege. Caesar stands before the walls in the cold morning, the sky overhead a muted silver. The air smells of wet stone. His soldiers wait for orders, their breath rising like mist. Caesar considers the situation with deep calm, understanding that haste could fracture the delicate balance he has maintained. The siege lasts days, not weeks. Eventually, the defenders lose heart, opening the gates with trembling hands. Caesar enters quietly, his footsteps soft against the stone. Inside, he encounters Domitius Ahenobarbus, a fervent enemy. The man expects execution. Instead, Caesar spares him. He frees prisoners. He returns confiscated funds. Mercy radiates from him not as spectacle, but as natural extension of discipline. The air inside the city shifts. Fear loosens, replaced by a cautious, unfamiliar respect. This moment matters. Rome watches closely. Caesar's mercy becomes a whisper carried through alleyways, through markets, through senate chambers where torches flicker against cold marble. People begin to wonder what kind of war this will be, one of destruction or one of recalibration. As Caesar continues south, he approaches Rome itself, now largely abandoned by Pompey's faction. Entering the city is not a conquest, it is a homecoming edged with melancholy. The forum lies quiet under a pale sky. The marble temples stand solemn, their steps damp from morning dew. Market stalls remain shuttered. The smell of stale incense lingers near the curia. Caesar walks through the empty streets with careful steps, feeling the memories of his youth echo around him. He stands before the treasury, not out of greed, but necessity. Rome needs funds, supplies, and stability. The vaults open with the dry creak of iron hinges, releasing the scent of cold metal and ancient storage. Caesar directs his men calmly, retrieving only what is needed to sustain the coming campaigns. His mind is already beyond Rome, already moving toward Pompey's growing forces across the sea. But before he leaves, he does something telling. He restores order. He reopens markets. He reassures citizens. He convenes what remains of the Senate. His voice in these sessions is quiet but firm, resonating through the chambers like a steady heartbeat in a fragile body. He is not here to destroy the Republic, not yet. He is here because the Republic, in its fractured state, could no longer contain the contradictions of its power. Days later, he leaves Rome behind again. The city's faint warmth lingers in his cloak. The roads once more stretch ahead, their surfaces shimmering under early spring light. His legions march towards Spain first. An unexpected decision, but a strategic one. To defeat Pompey, he must eliminate his allies. He must secure the western provinces. He must stabilize the foundations before confronting the towering structure. The march westward is long and dust-laden. Hills roll like slow waves across the horizon, their grasses pale and wind-tossed. The soldiers walk through villages where olive trees sway gently, their leaves silvering in the light. Caesar rides ahead, reading reports, making quiet notes on wax tablets. His pace is methodical. His thoughts are layered. At the foothills of the Pyrenees, he pauses. The wind that sweeps down from the mountains carries the scent of snow and stone. He breathes it in, feeling the cold settle calmly in his chest. He knows this war will span continents. He knows it will reshape Rome. He knows that every step forward narrows the possibility of return. Yet his mind remains still. The Republic sleeps uneasily at his back. Pompey gathers storms ahead, and Caesar, suspended between them, walks the edge of a world that is changing with every beat of his measured, relentless stride. Part 11. The Dictator Who Wanted to Heal Time. As you return to Caesar's story, imagine the long dust of the Spanish roads still clinging to his cloak. The campaigns in Iberia have settled, swift, precise victories that quiet the Western Front and shift the balance of the entire civil war. Caesar has returned east with the calm certainty of a man who now sees Pompey not as a distant rival, but as the single remaining force standing between him and control of the Republic's fate. The year turns, the seas open. Caesar crosses into Greece. The air along the coast is brisk, carrying the scent of salt, damp ropes, and pine tar from the ships moored along the shore. His soldiers disembark slowly, the planks creaking under their weight. The horizon is washed in pale morning light, and the faint cries of seabirds echo over the water. They march inland toward Pompey's forces, who have gathered strength, veteran legions, noble commanders, senators seeking shelter under his banner. The confrontation feels inevitable, but Caesar's thoughts are steady, his mind clear. At Dyrrhachium, he suffers his first real setback. Pompey digs in behind formidable fortifications. Caesar attempts to encircle him, building walls that stretch across rugged terrain like two great serpents of earth and timber. The work is relentless. Soldiers dig under blazing sun, their hands coated in dust, the air thick with the smell of sweat and fresh soil. Nights are filled with the glow of distant torches marking Pompey's lines. The light flickers across the hills like scattered stars. When Pompey finally breaks through, the clash is sharp and chaotic. Caesar's men falter. For a moment, brief, breath held, defeat brushes against Caesar like a cold hand. But he does not crumble. He withdraws with order, his voice rising calm and clear above the din. The retreat is disciplined, leaving Pompey with a victory, but not a decisive one. The winds shift, the war continues, and Caesar's resolve only deepens. Weeks later, both armies meet again at Pharsalus. The field is dusty, the earth dry beneath a bleached sky. Morning haze drifts low, blurring the edges of hills in a soft, pale veil. Caesar stands before his men, the breeze stirring his cloak, his voice steady as he reminds them not of glory, but of survival, of the years they have marched together, of the trust that binds them like iron. The sound of his words settles over the soldiers with a quiet weight. Pompey's forces outnumber Caesar's, glittering across the plains in tight ranks. Shields flash dully in the sun. Horses snort clouds of warm breath into the morning air. But numbers are not enough to break Caesar's precision. When the battle begins, dust rises in rolling waves. Arrows whistle, cavalry charges. The ground vibrates under thousands of feet, shaking loose dry clods of soil. Caesar watches the flow of the conflict with a clarity sharpened by years of command. Then, in a single, decisive moment, he orders his concealed fourth line forward, a quiet tactic held in reserve like a whispered secret. The field is silent except for the crackle of burning wood and the quiet moans of the wounded. Caesar walks among them with a somber stillness, offering water to enemy soldiers, giving orders for medical care, refusing unnecessary cruelty. The scent of dust, sweat, and extinguished fires hangs heavy over the valley. The war moves east. Caesar follows Pompey to Egypt, where a different kind of conflict awaits, one woven not from legions and formations, but from palace intrigues, silk-covered halls, and political tides hidden behind walls of carved limestone. When Caesar enters Alexandria, the city glows under the sun, white stone, blue water, the warm smell of salt, and blooming gardens drifting through narrow streets. He becomes entangled in a dispute between Cleopatra and her brother. Cleopatra, veiled in perfume faintly reminiscent of jasmine and honeyed oils, meets him in the nighttime quiet of the palace. The torches flicker golden light across marble floors. She speaks not with overwhelming passion, but with measured intellect and an understanding of power's subtleties. Caesar listens. He recognizes a mind sharpened by survival, a ruler shaped by uncertainty. Their partnership forms not from sudden infatuation, but from alignment, two figures navigating treacherous waters with controlled grace. Yet outside the palace walls, Egypt grows tense. A siege ignites along Alexandria's harbors. Caesar's forces hold out amid smoke, salt spray, and the sharp tang of burning ships. When the conflict finally ends and Cleopatra's rule is secured, Caesar leaves behind not only a political alliance, but a child, Ptolemy XV, known as Caesarion. Returning to Rome, he arrives not as a general seeking approval, but as a man already carrying the gravity of victory. The Senate grants him unprecedented powers. The city, bruised by years of turmoil, welcomes him with relief. Markets reopen. Temples receive offerings. The forum buzzes with renewed energy. The air smells of laurel, incense, and hope. Caesar becomes dictator, first briefly, then for 10 years, then without term. But dictatorship, for Caesar, does not begin with cruelty. It begins with repair. He reforms the calendar, correcting errors that had accumulated like dust in Rome's measurement of time. Under his guidance, the year realigns with the sun. Days settle back into their proper rhythm. Festivals return to their rightful seasons. The Julian calendar carries a quiet elegance, a structure Rome will use for centuries. He revises debt laws, easing burdens without collapsing the economy. He reorganizes provincial governance, curbing corruption that had grown like rot in forgotten corners of the Republic. He expands citizenship. He plans grand construction projects, river redirection, libraries, new colonies, to absorb Rome's restless poor. Walking through Rome now, Caesar often pauses at twilight. The city glows in warm amber light, its rooftops absorbing the last colors of day. Children run past carrying baskets of bread that smell faintly of anise. Veterans stop him with soft words of gratitude. The air feels lighter, almost hopeful. And yet, beneath this serenity, unease coils like smoke. Some senators fear his growing influence, his mercy at Corfinium, his restraint after Pharsalus. These qualities do not reassure them, they unsettle them. A man who wins with such calm certainty, who governs with such deliberate clarity, seems too large for their comfort. They whisper that the Republic cannot hold his weight much longer. Caesar senses this tension, but his focus remains on healing Rome, restoring order, smoothing fractures, rebuilding trust. He rises before the sun, his sandals tapping softly across marble floors as he moves through administrative chambers lit by pale dawn. He listens to petitions, signs decrees, meets envoys, oversees improvements. His days are dense, his nights short. Still, he works with gentle steadiness, like a man who believes time can be coaxed back into harmony. But time does not always obey those who wish to heal it. In quiet corners of the Senate, beneath lamplight that flickers across worried faces, a new storm begins to gather, one shaped not by distant enemies, but by Rome's own trembling heart. Part 12. Wine, Marble, and Whispered Knives. As you return to Caesar's story, imagine Rome in a strange period of stillness, neither triumphant nor terrified, but suspended. The civil wars have ended. The streets no longer echo with the panic of fleeing senators or the iron rhythm of marching legions. Instead, the city breathes in long, slow exhalations, like a body recovering from illness. Yet somewhere underneath this calm, under the warm glow of oil lamps, under the scent of wine in shaded porticos, under the creak of marble steps, tension stirs again. Caesar moves through Rome with the composure of a man who has seen too much chaos to be easily shaken. His days are filled with reforms and decisions that ripple through the Republic. New colonies to alleviate poverty, new laws to organize justice, new roads, new buildings. The Curia and Forum hum with activity. The smell of parchment and ink lingers in the halls where scribes bend over desks. The air inside public offices carries the faint perfume of wax and wet clay tablets. Everywhere he goes, Caesar leaves a trail of order, quiet, methodical, unhurried. But admiration is not universal. For some senators, Caesar's calm is unnerving. Power has gathered around him so naturally, so steadily, that it seems almost effortless. They watch him step through the Forum, senators bowing their heads as he passes, soldiers standing straighter, citizens parting in respectful silence. They see this, and their hearts tighten. Rome was meant to be governed by many, not by one man whose presence feels like a gravity that bends everything around it. They remember Pompey. They remember the wars. They remember the old Republic, frayed though it was. And each memory becomes a small stone dropped into water, creating ripples that move from senator to senator until they overlap in uneasy circles. At night, gatherings in aristocratic homes take on a new tone. The lamps burn low, casting long shadows across frescoed walls. Cups of dark wine rest on polished tables. Servants move quietly behind curtains, their footsteps barely audible. The conversations begin lightly, with politics, with gossip, with complaints about taxes or land laws. But slowly, delicately, they turn toward Caesar. A question raised here, a doubt whispered there, a fear tucked into a half smile. These whispers gather, soft as dust on a scroll. Meanwhile, Caesar continues his routines. He attends the Lupercalia festival, the air thick with incense and the sound of cheering crowds. Antony offers him a crown in a moment that feels more symbolic than sincere, and Caesar refuses it. The rejection ripples through Rome like a sudden cool breeze. Some are relieved, some are confused, some are not convinced. In private, Caesar reflects on his position. His home is quiet at night, filled with the warm scent of burning lamps and the soft crackle of the brazier. His papers lie scattered on the table, scrolls half unrolled, wax tablets still holding the imprint of his stylus. Calpurnia watches him with calm worry, sensing the strain beneath his composed exterior. Outside their windows, Rome murmurs, a sound like distant waves crashing against stone. He receives warnings at this time, cryptic messages, subtle hints, troubled glances. Friends urge caution. Allies sense something shifting in the Senate's corridors. But Caesar, who has survived exile, pirates, civil wars, and the storms of Gaul, cannot imagine that Rome's elite, educated, refined, indebted to him for peace, would raise a hand against him. The thought seems almost childish. He trusts too much in rationality, too much in gratitude, too much in the idea that Rome wants stability above all. The conspiracy grows quietly, like mold in a darkened corner. Its members are men Caesar knows well. Some he has forgiven, others he has promoted, some he has saved from political ruin. They gather in dim atriums, speaking in hushed voices, while the scent of wine and olives thickens the air around them. Cassius is sharp, restless, driven by long-held resentments. Brutus, gentle, thoughtful, beloved by Caesar, is torn, walking the narrow space between affection and ideology. Their meetings feel almost ceremonial. The clink of cups, the flicker of candles, the texture of silk garments brushing stone floors, all form the backdrop to decisions that will alter history. They speak of liberty, of tradition, of Rome's soul. Yet beneath their words lies something simpler. Fear. Fear of Caesar's reach. Fear of his reforms. Fear of a republic that might never belong to them again. Meanwhile, Caesar plans for the Parthian campaign. He thinks of conquering the east, of finishing the work begun by Crassus, of securing Rome's borders and restoring its pride. The world seems vast before him once more. Maps lie open on his desk, their edges curling slightly from use. His finger traces the curved lines of rivers and the dark contours of mountains. He imagines new roads, new provinces, new triumphs that could bind Rome together again. But time grows thin. The texture of the air around him changes, as though the city itself is bracing for something. Even the winds feel heavier, carrying the scent of coming rain. Calpurnia dreams of danger, her breath catching softly in the night, her fingers tightening around Caesar's wrist. He listens, touched by her concern, but he does not take the omen to heart. The Ides of March approach. In the temple precincts, priests examine the entrails of sacrificial animals, their faces clouded with uncertainty. Smoke curls upward, twisting through beams of sunlight that filter through high openings in the roof. The omens are troubling. Caesar notes their warnings, but he has long outgrown the habit of letting fear guide him. On the eve of the Ides, he sits in his home, the lamps burning low, their flames restless. The shadows dance across the walls like silent silhouettes. Papers rustle faintly on the table, stirred by a soft breeze that slips through a narrow window. Calpurnia urges him not to go to the Senate tomorrow. Her voice is gentle but quivering. Caesar reaches for her hand, steady as always. He tells her there is no danger he has not faced before. He tells her Rome needs him. He tells her the day will be ordinary. But outside, beneath Rome's marble arches and tiled rooftops, men move quietly in preparation. Their cloaks blend with the darkness. Their breaths are shallow. Their palms are damp. The knives they hide are small, easily concealed, sharpened with intention. The city holds its breath. Wine, marble, whispers, knives, all wait for the same hour, the same steps, the same man Tomorrow, Caesar will walk into the Senate, and the calm he has carried through all his life will follow him into the heart of Rome one last time. Part 13. March Shadows Beneath the Theater of Pompey. As you return to Caesar's story, imagine Rome in the earliest light of morning, its streets washed in a pale, colorless glow, its rooftops still holding the cool breath of night. The Ides of March arrive quietly, no thunder, no storm, only a soft, fragile calm settles over the city like thin silk. The air smells faintly of wet stone, wood smoke from distant hearths, and the first blossoming flowers that cling to shaded courtyards. Yet beneath this gentle stillness, something darker coils, hidden in the seams of Rome's waking day. Inside Caesar's home, the lamps burn low. Their flames flicker uneasily, casting wavering shadows across the walls. Calpurnia wakes with a start, her breath sharp, her fingers trembling slightly as she reaches for Caesar. Her dream clings to her voice, a vision of blood, of statues collapsing, of the house echoing with sorrow. She urges him not to go to the Senate. Her words tremble like thin reeds in the wind. For a moment, Caesar listens. His face is calm, softened by the early light. Outside their window, the city stirs with the faint murmurs of people beginning their day. He feels the weight of her fear, the sincerity in her eyes. The warmth of her hand lingers on his forearm. The quiet intimacy of their home surrounds him with a caution he rarely entertains. But he has promises to keep, meetings scheduled, senators expecting him, duties that cling to him like the folds of his toga. He straightens slightly, offering Calpurnia a reassuring nod. His voice is gentle, steady. He decides to go. Outside, the streets are damp from a night rain. The stones glisten with a muted sheen, reflecting faint slivers of morning light. Caesar walks through the city surrounded by attendants and lictors, their fasces catching small glimmers of sun. The lavender scent of early spring lingers in the air, mixed with the faint aroma of bread from nearby bakeries. The city appears calm, eerily calm, almost expectant. People glance towards Caesar with quiet curiosity, sensing something they cannot quite name. As he approaches the theater of Pompey, where the Senate temporarily meets, the building casts a long shadow across the square. The theater's portico looms tall and solemn, its columns cool to the touch, smelling faintly of old marble and dust. A soft breeze stirs the edges of Caesar's toga. He pauses briefly at the entrance. The air feels different here, heavier, as though holding its breath. The faint sound of sandals scuffing against stone echoes deeper within, where senators gather. Inside, the light filters in softly through high openings, bathing the chamber in muted gold. The hall smells of old parchment, lingering incense, and the faint metallic tang of bronze statues that stand watch along the walls. Senators rise as Caesar enters. Their faces seem composed, but their eyes carry flickering shadows. Worry, calculation, guilt. The atmosphere tightens, becoming a thin, fragile thread stretched across the room. Among them is Brutus. His expression is controlled, almost serene. His toga's folds drape neatly, but beneath his calm exterior, something trembles, an internal contradiction between affection and ideology. Caesar sees him, and in the quiet moment their eyes meet, there is familiarity, trust, warmth. Caesar steps forward without hesitation. The sound of his sandals against the marble floor echoes softly through the hall. The conspirators close in quietly, like dusk advancing across a courtyard. The chamber feels colder now, though the sun still shines faintly through the high openings. Caesar takes his seat. Papers lie before him, awaiting signatures. Discussions begin, ordinary at first, shaped by routine. A petition is presented, a small dispute raised. Caesar leans forward, listening, unaware of the hands slowly creeping toward hidden blades. Then a signal. It is small, a movement barely noticed by those not expecting it. The first conspirator approaches with a request framed in formal language. Caesar turns slightly to hear him better, his cloak shifting over the marble chair. The air thickens. A sudden rustle breaks the stillness. The first knife flashes, drawn quickly, almost clumsily. Caesar moves to rise, confusion sweeping across his features. The blade strikes, not deep, not fatal, but enough to fracture the moment. Chaos does not erupt loudly. It unfolds in a series of muffled breaths, soft gasps, whispers turn to trembling. The conspirators rush forward in close formation, their movements frantic, yet strangely quiet. Cloaks flutter, sandals scrape against stone. Caesar tries to stand, his voice caught between shock and command. Blades descend, thin, cold metal glinting in the filtered light. In the blur of motion, the senators' faces twist, not with triumph, but with something closer to fear. And then Brutus steps forward. For Caesar, the world slows. The edges of the room blur. The smell of incense and marble dust intensifies. The warmth of earlier sunlight seems to dim. He looks at Brutus, not with anger, not even with betrayal, but with a quiet, deep sorrow that softens the sharpness of everything else. Sentences die in his throat. Words drift away like smoke. There is no dramatic cry, no theatrical collapse, only a soft exhale. The room falls still. Caesar sinks to the base of Pompey's statue, its cold stone pressing against his shoulder. The air around him feels distant, muffled. His vision fades not into darkness, but into a pale, colorless wash, like dawn dissolving into mist. Footsteps shuffle away. Cloaks rustle as conspirators retreat, their faces drained, their breaths unsteady. The marble floor cools beneath him, carrying the faint smell of old dust and spilled wine from previous meetings. Rome holds its breath. Outside, the city continues unaware for a few brief moments. Vendors opening stalls, children chasing each other across quiet courtyards, women gathering water from fountains. But soon, the whispers will spread, the forum will tremble, the streets will fill with shock, grief, confusion. Inside the theater, one life ends quietly. A breath, a stillness, a dimming of the world. The man who crossed the Rubicon, who rewrote time, who held a restless republic together with steady hands, now lies beneath the gaze of a statue dedicated to the rival whose shadow once defined his rise. The knives are silent now. The whispers fade. Only the echo of a life lived with relentless calm remains in the air. Soft, lingering, unforgettable. Part 14. The world after the silence. When you return to Caesar's story now, the air around Rome feels different, lighter in some places, strangely hollow in others, as though the city itself has lost a steady rhythm it didn't realize it depended on. The Ides have passed. The conspirators have fled or hidden themselves behind trembling arguments about liberty, and the body of Julius Caesar lies pale and still within his home, surrounded by soft lamplight and the muted colors of mourning cloth. For a moment, the Republic seems frozen. Outside, dawn spreads across the city in fragile strokes of gold, brushing the rooftops and bathing the forum in a gentle glow that does nothing to warm the tension lingering in the air. The streets carry faint scents of wet clay, wilted flowers left at doorways and lingering incense from hurried rituals. Rome moves slowly today, citizens walking with hesitant steps, voices lowered as if unwilling to disturb the weight of what has happened. Inside the house, Calpurnia sits in a dim chamber, the air thick with grief and the faint fragrance of extinguished candles. The servants move quietly, their footfalls soft against the polished floor. Drapes hang heavy along the walls, their folds absorbing the weak morning light. In the center of the room lies Caesar, wrapped in a shroud that covers him from shoulders to feet. His face, serene in stillness, carries the faintest trace of the calm that defined his life, a final, gentle echo of his enduring composure. Word spreads through Rome like a low, rolling wave, first in whispers, then in murmurs, until finally the city hums with emotion, shock, sorrow, confusion, and a rising undercurrent of anger. The senators who orchestrated the assassination expected applause, gratitude, a surge of patriotic fervor. Instead, they find hallways colder than before, faces turned away from them, silence thick with unease. It is Marcus Antonius, Antony, who recognizes the shift most clearly. He walks through the forum with long strides, the early sunlight catching the edges of his cloak. The marble beneath his feet is cool, still damp from the night. The air smells faintly of worn stone and last night's rain. He does not move like a man defeated, nor like one seeking consolation. He moves with the purpose of someone carrying the memory of a friend, a commander, and a presence too large to let fade quietly. Antony retrieves Caesar's will. Inside the sealed document lies a picture of a man who intended to leave Rome, not harmed, but healed. Money to every citizen, gardens entrusted to the public, plans for future reforms. As Antony reads the words in private chambers lit by flickering lamps, he feels the weight of the Republic's misunderstanding. Caesar had not been finished. He had barely begun. The funeral is held in the forum, beneath an open sky that shifts slowly from pale blue to the warm gold of late afternoon. A wooden platform has been built. Flowers gather in heaps around it, laurel branches, violets, and pale spring blossoms whose scent mingles with the smoke of burning incense. Citizens crowd the square, their voices hushed, their garments brushed with dust. The heat of their bodies mixes with the cool stone underfoot, creating a soft haze in the air. When Antony steps forward to speak, a hush falls across the crowd. He stands beside the bier, the folds of his toga trembling slightly in the breeze. His voice begins low, measured, carrying across the forum like a slow-moving current. He does not shout. He does not accuse. He simply remembers Caesar the commander, Caesar the reformer, Caesar the man who forgave enemies and fed the poor, who calmed storms and bridged worlds. As he speaks, a quiet transformation spreads through the crowd. Faces soften, shoulders tremble. People begin to understand, not the rumors they heard, not the fears whispered in taverns, but the loss before them, a man who held Rome's fractures together with steady hands. When Antony reveals the wounds, one by one, gently lifting Caesar's garment so the sun can touch the torn flesh, the crowd inhales sharply. A wave of emotion surges, not violence, not chaos, but grief, pure, overwhelming, collective grief. It spills into the open air, mixing with dust, with sunlight, with the gentle flutter of banners overhead. A pyre is built. Wood is stacked carefully around the bier, its scent fresh and earthy. The flames, once lit, rise slowly, curling upward in warm gold and orange, sending sparks drifting into the pale sky. The smell of burning cedar and laurel fills the forum. People place flowers into the fire. Some touch the ground with trembling hands. Others bow their heads, whispering private farewells into the wind. Caesar's ashes are gathered reverently, placed in an urn that carries the faint warmth of the fire. The city remains quiet long after the flames fade, as though Rome itself is holding its breath. But the silence cannot last. In the days that follow, a new energy stirs within the city. The conspirators flee or hide behind hastily mustered troops. Antony consolidates support, and then, like a quiet tide rising beyond anyone's notice, another figure begins to emerge. Octavian, Caesar's young heir, summoned from the coast by news that quietly reshapes his destiny. Octavian enters Rome with a calm reminiscent of Caesar's younger years, a gentleness in his step, a soft focus in his gaze, a deliberate stillness that belies his age. His arrival stirs curiosity, then interest, then allegiance. Slowly, carefully, he gathers what Caesar left behind, Not wealth, not objects, but trust. Rome itself continues to shift. The Senate chambers echo with tense debates. Torches flicker along the curia's walls as voices rise and fall. The marble steps of the Forum grow warm under the sun as citizens gather to discuss what happens next. The air carries scents of wine, bread, olive oil, and an underlying current of anxiety. The Republic feels like a cracked vessel held together by hands unsure of how to support it. Yet through all this, Caesar's absence feels strangely present, like a quiet gravity shaping every decision, every whisper, every step taken beneath Rome's wide sky. In the weeks after the funeral, the city grows restless, stirred by memories. Some corners of Rome feel heavy with loss, others buzz with new ambition. But everywhere, Caesar's name lingers, carved in stone, spoken at night around shared lamps, held in the quiet breaths of soldiers who once marched beside him. Though his life has ended, the world he shaped has only begun to move. Ahead lie more conflicts, more alliances, more changes that will transform Rome into something the conspirators never imagined. But in this moment, this quiet space after the flames, the city stands suspended, wrapped in a mixture of sorrow, admiration, and the faint, rising hum of a future being born from the ashes of a life now gone. Part 15. How a single life became 1,000 years. As you return to the final chapter of Caesar's life, imagine Rome exhaling, slowly, shakily, after weeks of mourning. The city is changing, though few can yet see the full shape of what is coming. The air is warm again. The early spring breeze carries the scent of olive branches and stirred dust. And through every corner of the capital, from the shadowed Senate steps to the bustling marketplaces, one truth lingers like a faint echo. Caesar is gone, but the world around him has already begun to rearrange itself in his absence. Octavian moves carefully now through Rome's streets. His sandals tap softly against stone, worn smooth by generations. He carries himself with a restraint unusual for his age, as though he understands that the city watches him with mixed curiosity and hope. The houses he passes smell of incense burned in morning rituals, of bread newly baked, of lamps just extinguished after long nights of whispered debate. He senses that Caesar's shadow is not a burden, but a path, one he must follow with patience. Antony remains a steady force too, his presence strong, his voice still resonating from the funeral speech that stirred Rome's heart. He and Octavian navigate their early alliance with care, each step deliberate. They walk through shared chambers lit by flickering torches, their silhouettes long against marble walls. Scrolls lie spread across tables, maps marked with wax seals, and small figures indicating troops and territories. The air smells faintly of charcoal and old papyrus. They speak softly, weighing their next moves. The conspirators, meanwhile, scatter like birds startled from a branch. Some flee to distant provinces. Others remain trapped in the city's tight alleyways, feeling the eyes of the populace on them wherever they go. The Republic they claim to save does not rise to embrace them. Instead, the people drift toward the memory of Caesar, toward the man who fed them, calmed them, forgave them. His legacy, still fresh and warm, becomes a kind of quiet wind pushing history forward. As months pass, Rome grows louder again. Markets fill with voices. Smiths hammer bronze on anvils that ring through narrow streets. Children play games on sunlit steps. Life resumes its rhythm, but something essential has shifted. The old Republic, with its tangled lines of power and its fragile balance, feels increasingly like a relic from another age. In its place, something new begins to take shape, an idea not yet named, but already pulsing beneath the surface. Octavian, gathering strength, studies the path ahead. He meets with veterans who once marched under Caesar's eagles. Their armor is worn, their cheeks lined by years of dust and sun, but their eyes warm when they speak of their old commander. Octavian listens, absorbing their stories, their faith, their longing for order. In the cool air of evening, he walks among them, feeling the gravel crunch softly under his sandals. Torches burn low, filling the camp with a faint scent of smoke and pine. He understands that these men do not want the chaos the conspirators claim to fear. They want stability. In the background, Rome's politics continue to twist. Antony and Octavian form the second triumvirate, their alliance sealed in chambers where the shadows seem to deepen with every decision made. They divide the Republic's territories. They pursue the conspirators. They hunt the remnants of a movement that believed Rome could be restored by removing the man who understood it best. At Philippi, the final battle against Brutus and Cassius unfolds across plains where the grass bends beneath the wind and the sky hangs low and heavy. Octavian and Antony stand at the head of their armies, the scent of damp soil rising around them. When the dust settles, the conspirators are gone. The dream of the old republic fades with them. Rome stands on the edge of something new, a transformation born not from a single battle, but from years of quiet accumulation. And still, Caesar's presence lingers. It appears in the reforms that remain intact. It speaks through the veterans who carry his memory like a keepsake. It echoes in the architecture he commissioned, in the calendar he set, in the changed pulse of the Republic. Octavian becomes Augustus. Rome becomes an empire. The world shifts again, settling into rhythms that will endure for centuries. Streets that once trembled with political uncertainty now hum with organized life. Provinces that once resisted now integrate into a system woven together with law and roads and shared identity. And through it all, Caesar's influence stretches outward, like the widening rings that follow a stone dropped into still water. Years pass, decades pass, centuries unfold like pages from a slow-turning scroll. Rome expands and contracts, thrives and fractures, but the imprint of Caesar remains, a quiet outline beneath every triumphal arch, every reform, every echo of imperial ambition. His name becomes more than a man. It becomes a title, Caesar, a word carried to far kingdoms, adopted by emperors and kings who never knew him, who claim his name as a symbol of authority and longevity. Czar, Kaiser, variations that travel across languages and borders, each one a distant reflection of a life that began with a boy tracing the cool surface of a Roman column at dawn. In the centuries that follow, historians debate him, poets remember him, artists carve his profile into marble that will outlast entire nations. Children learn his victories, philosophers ponder his decisions. Each retelling adds a thread to the tapestry, expanding the story until Caesar becomes something simultaneously intimate and immeasurable, a single life magnified into 1,000 interpretations. But if you strip away the layers, if you quiet the noise of centuries and return to the man beneath the myth, you find something tender still. A child waking in a pale-lit room, a young advocate finding his voice, a commander walking through forests heavy with mist, a leader trying, quietly, earnestly, to restore order to a world unraveling at the seams. His life did not reshape the world through spectacle alone, but through steady presence, thoughtful resolve, and the calm conviction that Rome could be better than it was. And now, as the story settles into its final breath, you can imagine the city of Rome at dusk, its stones warm from the sun, its streets humming with life, its air filled with soft murmurs drifting between columns that still stand where he once walked. The world that remembers him is vast, but the man himself remains a single, steady note that continues to resonate across time. Thank you for drifting through this journey. If you enjoyed traveling softly through the past, maybe leave a like, or simply let the story guide you into rest. And if you'd like more quiet histories like this one, you can subscribe, but only if it feels right, only if it brings you calm. the world remembers you.